Hello and welcome. So today's video is going to be an exploration of an important concept in metaphysics known as possible worlds. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Grippus, and this channel is where I share basically the things I find interesting in philosophy and history and literature and so on. So today we are, as I said, covering the concept of possible worlds, which is a concept used in metaphysics to allow us to think about reality, not just as it is, but as it could have been. It is something like a tool, essentially, that philosophers use to explore questions about necessity, possibility, and also things like, alternative outcomes. So, as we delve into this, let's start with the basics. So what are possible worlds? In the simplest possible terms, a possible world is a way things might have been. So it's a complete and distinct version of reality with all the details filled in. So you can think of possible worlds as conceptual models or scenarios where different things happen. In these worlds, you may have different choices, or history may have unfolded in a different way. So let's go through an example to highlight that. So in our actual world, suppose you became a doctor, but there is a possible world where instead you decided to become a teacher. In that world, all the facts of reality might be the same, except that one difference. It's a way to think about how reality could have been, even though it isn't the case in the actual world. So possible worlds aren't, places we can actually visit, obviously. They are not alternate dimensions in the physical sense. This is not an extension of like multiverse theory or anything like that. Possible worlds are purely hypothetical, logical constructs that philosophers and metaphysicians use to think about possibilities and alternatives. So, possible worlds has quite an important role in modal logic. Possible worlds are obviously most commonly used in modal logic, which is in itself a branch of philosophy that deals with necessity and possibility. Modal logic helps us to talk about what is possible, necessary, or impossible in like different situations. So something is necessary if it's true in all possible worlds, and something is possible if it is true in at least one possible world. So let's look at an example. So take the statement, all bachelors are unmarried. This is a necessary truth because in every possible world, the word bachelor means what it means in our language. A bachelor is unmarried. So now consider this statement. There are purple elephants. This is possible because there could be a possible world where purple elephants exist, even if they don't exist in our actual world. So by thinking about these scenarios in terms of different possible worlds, we can better understand the difference between what must be the case and what could be the case, which is quite an important distinction. One of the more powerful uses of the concept of possible worlds is in analysing counterfactuals. So a counterfactual is a statement about what could have happened but didn't. These are the what if questions, the hypotheticals we often ask ourselves. What if I'd taken a different job? What if the Allies had lost World War II? Possible worlds give us a structured way of thinking about these hypothetical scenarios. So imagine you are considering the statement, if I had left my house earlier, I would have caught the bus. In the actual world, you missed the bus. But we can imagine a possible world where you left 5 minutes earlier and caught it. By comparing the actual world to the possible world, we get a sense of how things could have turned out differently. So now let's look at one of the most intriguing, in my opinion anyway, intriguing interpretations of possible worlds, which is modal realism, which is something that was developed by a philosopher called, oh, I'm so terrible with names, what is his name? David Lewis, that was who it was, David Lewis. According to Lewis, all possible worlds are equally real. They exist just as much as our actual world does. The only difference is that we don't live in them. We live in this one. In this view, every possible world is a concrete reality that is just as robust as our own, but we have no access to them. The world where you became a teacher, it exists in its own right, just as real as the world we inhabit, but entirely separate from it. So if modal realism is true, there is a real concrete world out there somewhere where Napoleon won at Waterloo, or where humans evolved wings. We just happen to exist in a world where Napoleon lost and humans are, sadly, wingless. So Lewis's view is, to say the least, it's controversial because it means accepting the existence of infinitely many worlds that are all real but inaccessible to you. And many philosophers find this hard to swallow because it seems to go beyond what we can reasonably believe about reality. So the idea of possible worlds, so David Lewis is quite a modern philosopher in the grand scheme of things, and he didn't create this concept of possible worlds. As a concept, it has quite a rich history, going back to a German philosopher and polymath, Gottfried Leibniz. And that was probably a horrible mispronunciation of the name, but I'm terrible at names, especially names that are intended for another language. But yeah, so Leibniz, who introduced the concept, He introduced the concept as a way to understand the choices available to God when creating the universe. So Leibniz believed that God created all the possible worlds that he could, and being perfectly good and wise, chose to create the best possible world. This is the world we live in. Leibniz's view is sometimes summed up as the belief that we live in the best of all possible worlds. So imagine a world where natural disasters never happen, or where no one ever gets sick. Such worlds are possible, but according to Leibniz, God must have good reasons for not actualizing them. He believed that our world, with all its its flaws and imperfections, is the best possible one when considering all the factors. So, on the surface, it doesn't seem to be a super practical concept, right? It's quite it's a truly philosophical concept in the sense, at least in public perception, of the sense that it is pure theory and perhaps not that useful in the real world. But it is actually incredibly useful. So when we think about it, obviously we have this idea of all these different possible worlds, and we think, well, That can't be useful because there's a lot of reasons why it couldn't be useful. Part of it being that we're not in those possible worlds and so on and so forth. But as a toolkit, possible worlds are used to clarify arguments about morality, identity, and logic. They help us to think carefully about the nature of truth and the consequences of our actions, and also the structure of reality itself. In law, lawyers and judges often engage in counterfactual reasoning to determine what could have happened if someone had acted differently. For example, if the company had not taken shortcuts, this accident would not have occurred. Possible worlds reasoning helps clarify these hypothetical scenarios and their implications for responsibility and justice. So, to summarize, the concept of possible worlds is an incredibly powerful and useful tool in metaphysics. It allows us to think about what could have been, what must be the case, and what might never happen. Whether we are analysing counterfactuals, engaging in modal logic, or contemplating the nature of reality, possible worlds gives us a structured way to think about the many, many, potentially infinite ways that reality could unfold. So now you have a rough overview of the concept of possible worlds, and with that rough overview, you are now able to use that tool to help you in your decision making and so on and so forth. But also, it means that when you hear a philosopher or metaphysician talking about their ideas and so on and so forth, it gives you obviously it gives you an insight into the language they're using and so on and so forth, but it also gives you access to the framework that they're using to think about their idea and to place it in the world and compare it to the world and so on. So it is a really important concept, and it's super basic. It is essentially a thought exercise, but it is incredibly useful. And to some extent, you probably already do engage in the use of the possible world concept when you are making decisions. What do I want to wear today? What do I want to eat? Whatever it may be, right? So it is something you're probably already doing subconsciously. So hopefully you found this video interesting and informative and useful and all of those things. And if you did, I would really appreciate if you did all the YouTubey things, like, subscribe, whatever else there is to do. That would be really appreciated. But that's all for today's video. It's really quite short, just to get the concept of possible worlds to you in such a way that you can then utilize it yourself.